Page 137, Tractate Shabbat. This weekend we have a special yortzeit. It's Moshe Rabbeinu, our biblical Moses. On Sunday, the 7th day of the month of Adar, according to our tradition, is the time that Moshe Rabbeinu was born and died at the age of 120. As they said, at Mispar Yamecha Amaleh, the Almighty makes sure the righteous Moshe Rabbeinu completed his lifetime. But if we read the story of his life, the very beginning, how Pharaoh commanded Kol habena yiloda ora tashlichu, every baby boy should put to the Nile River. It's a story of tremendous devotion of life, and also big phase of his life is the fact that he was born circumcised. With that in mind, we're about to study a subject which is a continuation of our discussion in the past several days, naming, since the baby, if he's born on time and need to take off the foreskin to do the Brit Milah, and that overrides Shabbat, it's apply only to a regular situation. However, if it's a situation such as it's not the exact 8th day, even, and soon you see how it happened earlier than the proper time, then it's a violation. But it's not so clear and simple at this stage. Why? Because any time that someone did unwittingly a violation, we learn that in the Tractate Shabbat that a person needs to bring a special offering. It's called the sin offering. However, in this situation, if he did it with the intent to do the mitzvah, then we treat it sometimes differently. So the cases we're going to study is all kind of rare circumstance of Brit Milah, but then we go to a lot of practical halachot, naming we're going to study the blessing before the Brit, who is obligated to do the Brit, what happened to the Mohel, who is the emissary of the father, how we treated the baby right after that, and if times allow us, we complete this parak and we go to the next one, chapter 20. Mishnah, page Kuf Lamed Zayin, 137, 6 lines from the top of the page. Mi shehayu lo shtei tinokot, echad lamul achar השבת, ואחד למול בשבת, ושכח ומל את שלאחר השבת בשבת, חייב. Number 1, Rabbeinu Prachya said that it's a fellow that have either 2 wives, which happened in the past, or it's a mohel that have 2 babies, and unfortunately he mixed the 2, which means one who had 2 babies to do the Brit Milah, and one need to do the Brit at the 8 days, which is the Shabbat. The other one needs to have the Brit on Sunday. Why does that happen? Imagine if one was born on Friday at the twilight, and one was born on Friday night, which was already night. So one needs to be circumcised in the following Shabbat. The other one needs to go to the next Sunday. Unfortunately, unintentionally, he has circumcised the baby that's supposed to be circumcised on Saturday. So here we enter to a new domain in halacha that is called ta'a bidvar mitzvah. If a person made a mistake with something that it's not only pure intent, but also it's involved with mitzvah, which is to do the brit. So here is the measurement. One hand, he violated Shabbat. How violated Shabbat? So we explained several times that it's netilat neshama. It's a part of which we call chovel, which means making a chabura, a damage, which is a sub-derivative from the melechet shochet, which is the prohibited labor of slaughtering on Shabbat. On the other hand, it was intent of doing mitzvah. So the Mishnah said here, chayav, he needs to bring a special sin offering. Why? Because he violated Shabbat by doing so. Even he was busy of doing mitzvah, he wants to do it on time, and you may think, since he's a to'eh bidvar mitzvah, if he did it with a pure intent of doing a mitzvah, he may exempt from sin offering. But the answer is no, he needs to bring a sin offering. Rashi, in a tractate Kritut, page 19, asks a question. It's mitasek. It's a person who occupied with mitzvah. But he followed that discussion in GEMARA that they said mekalkel b'chabura chayav. If someone did it while he is creating a wound, he is liable. Rabbi Akiva Iger, the great almost contemporary rabbi, have a lot of writing over this. Now, the second part, they said, if you have two babies, אחד למול בערב שבת ואחד למול בשבת, one needs to be circumcised on Friday and one on Saturday, ושכח ומל את של ערב שבת בשבת, and then he circumcised the one who's supposed to be on Friday, he did it on Saturday. So again, that's the opposite. He didn't do it in a premature way, he did it already past due time. Rabbi Eliezer mechayev chatat, ורבי יהושע poter. Rabbi Eliezer deems him liable to bring a sin offering. Why? Because the Brit Milah was after the appointed time, does not override Shabbat. And Rabbi Yoshua exempts. Why? His intent was to do a mitzvah. Even he made a mistake by the doing the mitzvah, is exempt of bringing sin offering. So the GEMARA explained what's the source for that. The Rambam have a long discussion over that. The Rambam said that there is a concept we learned earlier, it's called atafat dam brit, to pull out a blood in a situation that we don't have a regular foreskin. So he said, if it's premature, he's circumcised prematurely, the question is, part of the requirement, the Torah said in the book of Vayikra, in Leviticus, is to do it on 8 days. So since he was circumcised earlier, the Rambam said something fascinating. He said, this is exactly the same as a convert. You remember we discussed this situation, if an Arab come to us, who's already circumcised earlier, and he wants to be part of us, what do we say? We need to do a tafat dam. We need to pull out a little blood. So he said, the Rambam said, since you circumcised the baby in a premature day, and it's supposed to be on an 8 day, you still need to go ahead and do a tafat dam. But we don't have a time for that. I just give you the vignette of the Rambam. Now we go to the GEMARA. The GEMARA said, Rav Huna matne chayav, Rav Yuda matne patur, which means here he speaks about the baby that his time was on Friday, Erev Shabbat, and he's circumcised in the wrong time. So the Minchat Chinuch have a tremendous discussion over that, how and what we compare a premature circumcision versus late circumcision. And he tried to categorize that. Again, I wish to have more time for that. But anyway, the Gemara said, Rav Huna matne chayav, the Tanya. Rav Huna said that taught that the first part of the Mishnah stating liable is because we learn in the Tosefta. Omar Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar lo נחלקו רבי אליעזר ורבי יהושע על מי שהיו לו שתי תינוקות, אחד למוד בשבת ואחד למוד אחר שבת ושחר ומעלה שחר שבת בשבת שהוא חייב. I understand that if someone has a babies, two babies, and one needs to be circumcised on Saturday, and one needs to be on Sunday, and he mixed up the two. So that's clearly liable for sin offering. Why? Because he didn't perform a mitzvah by doing that, because it was a premature, it was not at proper time, it was supposed to be on Sunday. Al ma nechelku, what is the disputation? על מי שהיו לו שני תינוקות, אחד למול בערב שבת, ואחד למול בשבת, ושכח ומלט של ערב שבת בשבת. Which means that here is a situation that he fulfilled the mitzvah, but it was premature. שרבי אליעזר מחלל ערב חטאת, ורבי יהושע פוטר, as we said, רבי אליעזר deemed a sin offering, and רבי יהושע exempt. ושניהם, and both of them, which is רבי אליעזר ורבי יהושע, לא למדו אלא מעבודת כוכבים. They juxtapose from the idea of idolatry, which means the Torah details the halakha bringing a sin offering from one within transgressions. So we compare the sin offering to that. רבי אלעזר סבר, מה עבודת כוכבים? מה עבודת כוכבים? מה רחמנא לא תעביד וכי יעביד מחייב. Since in idolatry the Torah stated you do not perform certain activities, and someone did it, so he is it's a violation of negative commandment. So if he did it unwittingly, he needs to bring a sin offering. And now, therefore, it's not a different wine, because since he transgressed the prohibition, he's liable to bring a sin offering. ורבי יהושע סבר, however, רבי יהושע hold, הטעם דלאו מצווה, הכה מצווה. Says, well, when the unwitting transaction was performed, it is in order to fulfill a mitzvah. So one who is liable to bring a sin offering, but here the intention was to perform a mitzvah, and one who unwittingly violated a prohibition in the course of attempting to fulfill a mitzvah is exempt to from bringing a sin offering. So that's the opinion of Rav Huna and the opinion of Rabbi Yoshua ben Elazar. רבי יהודה מתני פטור דתניא אמר רבי מאיר לא נחלקו רבי אליעזר ורבי יהושע על מי שהיו שתי תינוקות, אחד למוד בערב שבת ואחד למוד שבת ושכח ומלט של ערב שבת ושבת שהוא פטור. Exactly what we said. He made it in the wrong time, which is the one who's supposed to be on Friday, he did it on Saturday, so he's exempt. Why? It's called ta'ah bidvar mitzvah. What is ta'ah bidvar mitzvah? No, help me. What is ta'ah bidvar mitzvah? No, someone who made a mistake while fulfilling a mitzvah. It's not that he made a mistake and he committed a sin. He made a mistake in something that it's basically a mitzvah. So that's different, right? You know what you remind me? I know it's early in the morning, but you guys remind me a story about a preacher who standing at the midst of a stage, and he noticed a man fall asleep. His speech was so boring. So he said to a man next to him, "Excuse me, sir, can you wake up the guy next to you?" So the fellow looked at the preacher and he said, "Well, you put him to sleep, you should wake him up."
That's right.
על מה נחלקו? על מי שהיו לו שני תינוקות, אחד למול אחר השבת ואחד למול בשבת, ושכח ולמלט של אחר השבת בשבת. What is the real מחלוקת? If there are two babies, one needs to be circumcised on Sunday and one on Shabbat, and he mixed the two and he circumcised the one that's supposed to be on Sunday on Saturday, שרבי אליעזר מחייב חטאת. Why? רבי אליעזר require a sin offering? Because he didn't fulfill the mitzvah. Why? Because it's premature. It's supposed to be on Sunday. ורבי יהושע פוטר, רבי יהושע exempt. He said, since even it wasn't in the right time, but he did a mitzvah, which is, in a sense, he mixed up something that it's still a mitzvah.
Right.
And he has a pure intent. ושניהם לא למדו אלא מעבודת כוכבים. Both of them learn it, again, by juxtaposed עבודת כוכבים. Exactly the way we learn, which is, רבי אליעזר סבר מה עבודת כוכבים רחמנא לא תעביד וכי יעביד מחייב הכנה לא שנה, רבי יהושע סבר אתה לא תריד מצווה, תריד מצווה. Exactly the way we said earlier, that because one hold the same ways that the idolatry, the Torah stated, do not perform a certain activities, and when one performs them unwittingly, he is liable to bring a sin offering. So here too is no difference. And the Rabbi Yeshua hold that there, in regard to idolatry, one is liable to bring a sin offering when he performs a transgression because he is preoccupied with the performance of a mitzvah. He was so busy with that, he didn't focus, he didn't think about it. So therefore, he is exempt. So what we understand, so wrap up what we understand so far. According to the opinion of Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, and that's the way Rav Huna hold in the Mishnah, the disputation between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua is someone who made a mistake, to'eh bidvar mitzvah, someone who made a mistake in something at the mitzvah, that Rabbi Yoshua is exempt and Rabbi Eliezer make him liable. But if he made a mistake, not only making a mistake, but it was not any fulfillment of the mitzvah, everyone said that he is liable. According to the second opinion, which is the opinion of Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda Mishnah, the disputation is when he did not fulfill a mitzvah while he made those mistakes. Rabbi Eliezer requires a sin offering, Rabbi Yoshua exempt, but if he did a mitzvah, everybody said that he is exempt from sin offering. So now we'll bring the third braita. Tani Rabbi Chia. אומר היה רבי מאיר, לא נחלקו רבי אליעזר רבי יהושע על מי שהיו לו שני תינוקות, אחד למוד בערב שבת ואחד למוד בשבת. ושכח ומלט של ערב שבת בשבת שהוא חייב. The מחלוקת, the disputation, it's only in a situation someone has two babies, and one needs to be circumcised on Friday and one on Saturday, and he make a mistake and he circumcised the one who's supposed to be on Friday on Saturday, which means that it was late, that he is so he's liable. Why? Because instead of doing it in 8 days, which is Friday, he did it on Saturday. But the real disputation here, it's if one have two babies, one is Sunday and one is Saturday, and he mix up and he circumcise the one on Sunday on Saturday, which means the Saturdays for that baby is the 7 days. Rabbi Eliezer require him to bring a sin offering, and Rabbi Yoshua exempt. Why? Because if he fulfilled the mitzvah, everyone said that he need to bring a sin offering. The only problem is if he did not fulfill any mitzvah. So the Gemara asks, Hashta Rabbi Yoshua seifa de l'kohavid mitzvah poter reisha de kohavid mitzvah mechayev? It's very irrational. It has to be the opposite. They said, now after all, in the second part, the second clause, where he did not perform a mitzvah, so Rabbi Yeshua exempt, and then in the Reisha, what we said in the beginning, where he performed a mitzvah, does Rabbi Yeshua deem him liable? Why? It looks like the opposite. So the Gemara answered, and they said, Amri dever Rabbi Yanai, Reisha. The first part is Kegon shekadam umal shel Shabbat be'erev Shabbat, which is the first part talking about making a circumcision on Friday, that it's basically the 7th day instead of Shabbat. Again, that's a new story. It's not a Brit Milah anymore on Shabbat, it's the Brit Milah on Friday of a baby that's supposed to circumcise on Saturday. Why? Delo nitna Shabbat lidachot. Because Shabbat is not given to be overridden at all, since the baby who was supposed to be circumcised on Shabbat was already circumcised. So that's the big issue. Seifa, which is the second clause, the circumcision was performed in a situation where it says nitna Shabbat lidachot. Shabbat is given to be override. Why? Because he didn't circumcise the baby at the time on Shabbat. He was busy of fulfilling the mitzvah. So therefore, Rabbi Yoshua exempt him from sin offering, even he did not fulfill the mitzvah of Brit. Over אמר לרבה של רב כהנא הרי שנה מניתנה שבת להידחות לגבי תינוקות בעלמא. So he asked, this applied the first clause, also Shabbat is given to override with regard to baby in general. However, he said, Rav Kahana responded, he said, with regard to this person, Shabbat is not given to overridden. Why? Because he doesn't have a baby to circumcise today. He's not busy in the mitzvah, so therefore he's not exempt from chatat. I must comment on that. Again, I wish to have more time. Rab Chaim is a whole the opposite than the Ritva in this sense. I'll just give you the abbreviation. Rab Chaim holds the same as the Rambam, that if it was premature brit, we need to have the hatafat dam brit, the little dripping of blood, if it was a premature. But he holds that b'di'avad, by force of circumstance, if the brit was earlier, premature, it is still brit. The big question is...
but he's saying you have to, on the 8th day, draw some blood.
Okay.
Is that what he's saying?
Okay, so Ritva hold that under no circumstance you can do it earlier, and then you have to draw blood afterwards.
So if you made a mistake and did it earlier, you have to draw blood on the 8th day. Okay.
Rabbeinu Chaim, he is not so much sure about it. He said the brit was the brit, the foreskin were taken.
So you don't have to draw blood on the 8th day?
He is in the intent not to do it, because, again, the big question is, we're not talking yet a practical halachot. We'll go there. But the big question yet is, that's what Reb Chaim in debate with the Ritva, the Brit was the Brit.
Right.
The timing was wrong. But the Torah asked her for two components. One is to do the Brit Milah, which is to circumcise, to take off the foreskin. And the other one is to do it to the 8th day. Right. So he mixed the day, but the Brit was the Brit. That's what Reb Chaim.
Now,
the Ritva hold that the date is the most important thing, first and foremost. So therefore, according to Ritva, under no circumstance you can let go, but you have to draw a little blood.
But does the Ritva, what about, but he doesn't have a problem if it was done late, right?
If it was done late, no, it's not a problem.
So the only dispute really is when it's done early as to whether it was...
According to this machloket between Reb Chaim and Ritva, yes.
Okay.
Because it say 8 days, so you can't go before that.
Right, but I mean the point is there's all kinds of reasons.
It was all unintentional.
But there's many reasons why you could do it late though. Like if the infant was not healthy.
Hepatitis infections.
Yeah, etc. So there's all kinds of times you do it late, but there's never an excuse for doing it early.
Correct.
Right.
So
in that sense you're right. But again, I encourage you in the future to see the Rambam. He has a lot to write in Milchat Chinuch as well. Anyway, Mishna. קטן נימול לשמונה, לתשעה ולעשרה ול11 ול12, לא פחות ולא יותר. You remember when we studied Megillah and we said about the days that we can read the Megillah? So you can resonate that idea. We learn in the Mishnah that one does not circumcise a sick baby if it's until it becomes a healthy. So the Mishnah said, although a child is generally circumcised at the 8 days, why? Because the Torah said clearly, Uvayom Hashmini, the 8 days in Leviticus 12, we shall circumcise. But he said at times it can happen that it can be at the 9th day, at the 10, 11, and 12, but no earlier, which is not before the 8, and not later, not after the 12 days.
Makes sense.
Okay, hakitzad. Here they elaborate that. Lishmona, that's a regular situation. Nolad leben hashmashot. If it was at twilight, so twilight, the Taz tells us that we need to see the 3 stars in one location, because if you look up and it's one star and very far away from the others, and you need to search for the 3rd star, that's not fully ben hashmashot. By the time that you see the tzet, which means that the whole 3 together, that's already night. So if it was in a twilight time, So since it's a debate, if it's a day or it's night, and you're not sure, so therefore, remember we discussed it in page 34. So therefore, we go to the following day, which is the night. Ben hashmashot shel erev Shabbat, if it's on a Friday in a twilight, nimo la'asara, he goes to the 10th day, which is the following Sunday, which is the 10th day from that point. Because if you count Friday as a day, and then you count the following Saturday as a day, so then Sunday, it's already what? It's already 10 days.
The way they're doing the counting here, they seem to imply that the twilight period is the previous day, part of the
Correct.
previous day.
At this point, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yom Tov le'achar Shabbat, if it was on Sunday, so again, that you cannot circumcise in this Sunday, nimo le'achad asar, he has to go follow the following Monday. Shnei yamim shel Rosh Hashanah, if it was 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, so they said nimo le'shtem asar, which is the following Tuesday. So just as a side note, the Ritva in Yevamot 46 explain when we have, like in a diaspora, 2 days of holiday. So if it was the 2nd day of the festival, such as 2nd day of Pesach, outside in exile, so it's much lenient, and he go ahead and he postponed it because of that. Rosh Hashanah is considering Yom HaArichta. It's a one long day. So the Rosh explained the reason that we use the term of Rosh Hashanah, it's because this Mishnah was taught in the West, which is in Eretz Israel, that they have only 2 days of Yom Tov on Rosh Hashanah. That's the Rosh said. The Mishnah concluded and said, all of that apply to a healthy baby. But the baby is sick, we should not circumcise until the baby becomes healthy. So even you may say that it's not sick in a dangerous terminal ill or very dangerous sickness. But if it's a fear, the Ramban and the Rashba said, if it's a fear that maybe he can enter the domain of a life-threatening, you right away have to postpone it. Amar Shmuel chalatzato chama notnim lo kol shiva la'avroto. If all of a sudden this baby has a fever, so one gives him a full 7 days to heal before circumcising him. So the question is, if we require during the recovery period to wait from time the 7 days begin to the exact same 7 times 7 days, which means the 7 complete 24-hour periods, or is it enough to wait 7 days without taking into account the time of the day? Because again, the whole idea is there has to be bizmana on time. Tashma letane luda. Luda is the name of a sage. Yom havra'ato ke yom ivaldo. The day that he was born, the day that he was healed, it's considering the same as day as that is his birth. Which means the same way as we are waiting for a healthy baby for the 8 days after his birth, the same way we have to wait for a sick baby to 8 days after he is fully healed. My love, מה יום היוולדו לא באינן מעת לעת, אף יום הבראתו לא באינן מעת לעת. Now we ask a question. Since in the day that he was born, we didn't wait in that period of time, we right away counted. So the same way, you think here. So they said, no, you cannot compare it. Why? Adif yom havra'ato miyom hivaldo. The moment that he was healed is better than the day he was born. Why? The ilu yom hivaldo lo be'inan me'et le'ed. When he was born is a natural delivery, natural birth. So you don't need to wait a certain period, you just count the 8 days from that moment. But the moment that he was healed, that's a issue. Why? Because it's called safek. It's a dilemma. It's a question. Why? Because from the day that he was healing, we need to have to complete 7 days from time to time, because that's the rule over the sick babies, that we must wait this period 7 days, and the 8 days you're circumcised. The Rishonim have a discussion over that, because they said, is that apply only to that part of his body, or the waiting period apply to entire body? Listen carefully what the Rishonim ask. Everyone understand this question? The Rishonim ask a question. Since we said that after the baby healed, we need to wait now to the 8 days to circumcise him, is that apply to his entire body, or you say that you have to wait for a healing period only for the area of the circumcision, but even he is not well in the other part of the body, that's not part of our consideration. It's a very serious discussion among the Rishonim, but it's beyond the scope of our study today. Mishnah. If you remember, we discussed earlier the idea of tzitzin, which is a little pieces of skin that come out while they do the Brit Milah. So now the Mishnah zoomed into that subject and said, Elu hen tzitzin hame'akvin et hamilah. These are the shreds of flesh that invalidate the circumcision if they are not cut. בשר החופה את העטרה ואינו נאכל בתרומה, which means if there is a flesh covered the most of the corona and the child was not circumcised in this matter, is considered uncircumcised. And as you know, the idea of eating truma has to be circumcised, the Torah said. So therefore he holds the same idea as arel, that someone who's uncircumcised cannot eat the teruma. Ve'im haya ba'al basar, if it was a fleshy, which means a not necessarily fat baby, but it's talk about the foreskin that it's fleshy. Metakno mipnei marita ayin. So you have to correct the circumcision more than necessary to avoid appearance of transgression, so it will not appear that he is circumcised. So the Yoredea, Nekudat HaKesef in Yoredea and Reish Samech Dalet in 264 explain that we are taking a very serious consideration the appearance, and since we want to make sure that it looks, so the moral needs to go a little more in the skin. Just turn the page to 137b. If you remember, when we talk about the Brit, we talk about the procedure, and part of the procedure is to uncover. It's called pri'ah. So the Mishnah continues and says, mal velo para et hamilah כאילו lo mal. That's called gilui atara, which means if one has the Brit but did not uncover the flesh of the area of the circumcision, how? He needs to fold back the thin part of the beneath the foreskin, so it's considering as he is not circumcised. That's the part of the peria. And Rabbi Yonatan Milunil said that it's considering full uncircumcised and he cannot eat teruma. Omar Rabbi Avina, Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba Amar Rav, basar hachofe et rov govha shel atara. So it's only one spot, he said, that the flesh that covers the most of the heights of the corona, as well as most of his part of the circumcision. So they said ve'im haya ba'al basar. So if he is a flashing, we need to fix it not to appear uncircumcised. Omar Shmuel, katana mesurbal bebasar. if it's a child that was have a great amount of flash. So they said, רואים אותו כל זמן שמתקשה ונראה מעול, אינו צריך למול, ואם לאו צריך למול. We have to look and examine. As long as when the limb hardened, he look circumcised, so he doesn't need a circumcision. But if not, he needs. That's part, if you pay attention, the mohel nowadays go there and check in advance before he does the circumcision to make sure that the baby is not appear in any form circumcised. Mematnita Tana. So we learn in the Braita, Rabban Shimon Gamliel Omer Katan Mesubal Basar Lo Tokos Mash Mekshar Niramaul Tzarich Mulo Lav Tzarich Mulo. This say, my benai, what's the difference between the first Tosefta to this Braita? Ika benai nireh ve'eno nireh. The practical difference is between the case that it's appear circumcised or it's not appear uncircumcised. So according to Shmuel, in order to avoid the additional circumcision, one must appear fully circumcised. That's, otherwise it's insufficient. Rabban Shimon Gamliel said only who appear uncircumcised require further circumcision, because this partial circumcision is adequate. Then the Mishnah said, Mal velo para. If he circumcised a child but did not uncover the area of the circumcision. So now we concluded with a beautiful Tosefta from Brachot, which have a lot of practical application, and that's applied to what? To a blessing we have at that time. So those of you who have a privilege, like your rabbi, to go very often to do britot, meaning I'm not a mohel, but I attend just day before yesterday the brit of the child of the Kohens. So there is a blessings. There is a lot of honorees. So here, usually what happened, the father of the child appointed someone, which is the moel, to be his shaliach, his emissary, to circumcise the baby. Tanu Rabbanan, the sages told us, Hamal Omer, the one who performed the Brit Milah, should say, Baruch Ata Hashem Elokeinu Melech HaOlam, Asher Kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, who sanctified us in His commandment, Vetzivanu ala Milah, and commanded us for the Brit. So remember the Gemara in Pesachim said that all the mitzvot has to be over la'asiyatam. You're eating an apple, what do you do first? First you make a bracha, bor pri'aetz, and then you eat the apple. So since you're about to circumcise, so first you make the bracha. So therefore, you do it first. But there are some mohalim that does the Brit Milah while they're doing it, or right after they start, cutting. So the Shulchan Aruch Yodea Reish Samechei deal with that. Then they said, Avia Ben Omer, the father of the child. Why are you using Avia Ben? Because it's not always the mohel. Can be both. Like my youngest brother, my father was also the moel. But usually, as far as I know, people appointed the moel to do for them. So he said again, Baruch Ata Etzerwa, Asher Kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, Vetzivanu la'achniso b'brito shel Avraham Avinu. That God commanded us to be part of our ancestor Abraham covenant. So again, there are questions when they do it. So the halacha is that he needs to wait after he does the brit, and then he makes that this bracha. Why? Because some say that it's not bracha of the mitzvah; it's just thanking God. It's like Thanksgiving. It's not for the sake of healing of the child. It's just but there are two. As you see, there are two blessings here involved. One is ala milah for the brit, and one to bring him under the covenant. So the GEMARA said in Kiddushim, it's a famous GEMARA that said that the father is obligated to several things. To teach a trade to his son, he is obligated to do certain things. One of them is to circumcise his son. So because remember, it's a baby, so that's the obligation of the father.
Now, so, for mohel as a father, do they say both brachot?
Obviously, yes, because we said that each bracha is a separate entity, is a separate need. But the Rambam and the Ravid said If there's no father there, it's a big question who said that bracha. If the father of the child, most of the rabbis said that if he's the moral, he should say 2 brachot. But the Sefer HaItur and also Or Zarua and others hold that maybe say 1 bracha. So it's a very big discussion. There are those who say that the father should say Shehecheyanu as well. But it's a again dispute. The Sephardim has the minhag to do Shehecheyanu, right, Gilbert?
Mm-hmm.
The Ashkenazim here do not say Shehecheyanu. In Israel they do say Shehecheyanu by the Ashkenazim. Anyway, soon we go to practical halacha. Ha'omdim sham omrim, the people who attend the Brit, as you know, they all wants to see Eliyahu Hanavi, right? So those who attend to the simcha of the Brit should say Keshem shenichnas lebrit, kach yikanes leTorah, lechupa ulemaasim tovim. The same way as they enter the covenant of the Brit, he should enter to the chuppah, right? It's the leTorah, lechupa, maasim tovim. Why we go in that stage? So he said Torah is because that's the father obligation. Father is obligated to teach the son Torah, to marry him and to teach him a trade. If he was a bechor, if he was a firstborn, he need also to redeem him. That's the father. So we bless him that he will merit to have the other mitzvot. That's the Gemara said, if you remember in Kiddushin, we said that if the father did not teach his son trade, it's dangerous because he needs to make a living. He can do all kind of dishonest act, like thievery, etc. If you don't teach him a trade, that is a father obligation. Why chuppah is the second? It should be Torah, Maasim Tovim, and chuppah, because Maasim Tovim is a good deed that should come before chuppah. So Budraham said, he asked, you know, the whole obligation of Maasim Tovim is when he is turned bar mitzvah to tell him, you know, that's the obligation. So chuppah is 18 and onward. So they said there is some hold that the heavenly punishment for this type of sins apply only from the reach of age 20. That's one school of thought. There are others. Anyway, והמברך אומר, the one after the brit should say, ברוך אתה השם אשר קידש ידיד מבטן, the same way as God sanctified Isaac, because the Torah said asher ahavta, we said in the parsha of the Akedah, asher ahavta, that you love, which means that he was sanctified from his mother womb, Isaac, for the brit that Abraham was commanded before Isaac was born. Chok b'she'ero sam, that God put the law within his flesh, v'tze'etza'av, and the descendants of Isaac, chatam be'ot brit kodesh, God sealed in the holy covenant, al ken bizchar zot אל חי כחלקנו צווה להציל את עדות שאירנו משחר למעל בריתו אשר שם בבשרנו ברוך אתה השם כורת הברית. So they said therefore they use the term of the GEMARA used the term therefore as a reward for this the living God our portion commanded to deliver the beloved of our flesh from destruction for the sake of his covenant, and he said with his flesh, blessed of God, to establish the covenant. So you see here a special prayer. The Tur and Shulchan Aruch said in Yoredei Reis Samechei that there are some who add more prayer. If you pay attention in some Britot, you see people distribute papers of special prayer. There are several reasons. One of them is the belief when the baby is crying, that's the time that the heavenly gates are open for prayer, and the person should use that precious moment to pray for his urgent needs. There's a special prayer that sometimes they distribute during that period. It takes a few seconds until the baby stops crying. In those moments, people should pray. But anyway, Hamalet HaGerim. Now we're dealing in the last part of the perek, which is a circumcision of a girl. I remember when the Russian came, and they claim they're Jewish, but they're not circumcised. So
there's a lot in this country too, because I know my father
okay.
performed a lot of surgical circumcision
Okay.
on Russians when they came to this country that were Jewish and weren't allowed to be circumcised when they were in Russia.
So they said, Baruch ata Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al hamilah. The same, God commanded us concerning this circumcision. והמברך אומר, the one who make a blessing should say, אשר קידשנו במצוותיו וציוונו למול את הגרים ולהטיף מהם דם ברית. God commanded us to drip from them a covenantal blood. And the source in the book of Jeremiah 33, they said, שאלמלא דם ברית לא נתקמו שמיים וארץ, שנאמר, אם לא ברית יומם ולילה, חוקות שמיים וארץ לא שמתי. Without the blood of the covenant, the world, heaven and earth, will not exist. It's because they said, without the covenant, day and night, God said, I will not place the ordinance of the heaven and the earth. Baruch ata Hashem, blessed are you God, koret abrit, who establishes the covenant. The Rif said that we should make only one bracha, but soon we'll go to a practical halachot with that manner. Hamalet ha'avadim omer, when in those days a Jew buy a Canaanite or any other type of servants, so he's obligated to circumcise the slave. That's part of what we said, that the slave is partially in entering the covenant of the Jewish people. So one who does that need to say Asher Gitshanu mitzvotav v'tzivanu ala milah. He needs to say the brit milah v'amvarech, and one who make the blessing. And who was that? So the Shach said that was the honor, the same way as the father does for his son. That's the Bach, and the Shach said that everyone can do that blessing. So he said, "Asher kitshanu mitzvotav v'tzivanu lamul ta'avadim la'ativ dem b'ambrit shemdei dabrit chukei v'shalom lo tzamti." The same mindset. שנאמר, אם לא ברית יובם עליו, חוקות שמם בארץ ושמתי, ברוך אתה השם קורא את הברית. So that apply specifically in the gerim, in the convert, and avadim, in a slave. But if it's an adult convert, so this is a little different, because the way that we make those blessings, as I said, it's a very in your opinion, who exactly does those blessings, how many and who does them. Most of as I said, the Shach and the Bach dispute over that, but most of the places, most of the rabbis hold that the one who performed it should recite those blessings. Hadran alach Rabbi Eliezer de Milah. We should go ahead and revisit this perek, this chapter 19, Rabbi Eliezer de Milah. Chapter 20. This chapter dealing with a lot of halachot in regard to rabbinic prohibition of food preparation on Shabbat. For example, do we allow to have a wine strainer? We allow to suspend on Shabbat the wine strainer. What food may be strained and what not, etc. So I would like to start with the Mishnah Brura, Shin Tet Vav 315, Seif Katan Lamed Vav. I'm reading from the code, then I'm reading Mishnah Brura, and that gives us a little foundation before we go to the first Mishnah in this perek, page 137b. משמרת שתולין אותה לתת בה שמרים לסננן, ומותחין פיה לכל צד, חשוב עשיית אוהל ואסור לנטותה. A strainer that one suspends over a utensil so that dregs can be put inside it to be a strainer, and whose opening is stretched in all directions, when it is used, is forbidden to be spread out on Shabbat, since it is considered a transgression of the prohibition against making a tent if one does so. Mishnah Brura, Lamed Vav, 36. I just translated the Mishnah Brura from the text itself. It seems that the strainer referred to here is made like a sort of sack called lugin zak, which is in Yiddish. It is a wide and open at the top and close and pointed at the bottom, and one inserts the pointed end inside the utensil and surrounds the utensil with the edge of the opening at the wide upper end of the strainer. It thus forms a roof to the utensil and serves like a tent, and it is therefore forbidden by the sages to set it up. On the contrary, it is permitted to suspend the strainer spread out on same page if there is no utensil underneath, because then it is not even considered a provincial tent, since there is no partitions, and it's certainly permitted to suspend a utensil on a page. So here we go to the subject of meshameret, and we are basically talking about taking the wine on Shabbat and Yom Tov and basically stretch over the base of the strainer, to which the sediment is filtered from the wine. So in the Talmudic time, a strainer considered of a rim with a handle above it, and straining was accomplished by fabric that was stretched over the rim of the container and tied at the bottom. So that's called melechet meshamer, which is mesanen. Now we go to the Mishnah itself. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, תולין את המשמרת ביום טוב ונותנים לה תלויה בשבת. Rabbi Eliezer said that one may suspend and stretch over a base the strainer on a festival, and one may place one through the strainer that was already suspended by the day before, but he cannot do that on Shabbat. Why? Because it's still a tent and it's considering a building. That's one option. Or you can say that it's breira, which means you're separating ochel mipsolet. So Rashi said here, I'm just reading the Rashi, shemesanenim ba shimrei yain, you just take this foundation of the wine and use this strainer, and then he said the avid oil, the avalgav the avid oil share biyom tov, even he make like a tent, it's allowed on Yom Tov. And then he go to the issue of borer. He said the ein derech borer bekach.
Is it an issue of size as to whether it's considered a tent or not, or does that not matter?
Now that I understand so far, it's not.
So even a very small little rim like that would still be considered boner.
In my understanding, it's not the size so far, but let's see a little further. V'chachamim omrim, and in advance I tell you that halacha is according to chachamim. So let's see what the sages said. Ein tolin et hamshameret biyom tov. You not allow to suspend the strainer on a festival, and therefore for sure not on Shabbat. Ve'ein notlin la tluya b'Shabbat, and one may not place wine for filtering through a suspended strainer on Shabbat. Aval notlin la tluya biyom tov. However, one may place a wine through a suspended strainer on a festival. So, according to the Chachamim, it's a derivative of either borer, which is selecting, or meraked. But here, the only question is if it's melechet ochel nefesh, if it's for food you need for the Yom Tov.
Right. So,
the sages said that it may an issue, because if there's something that you can prepare in advance, or for example, the whole idea of cooking on Yom Tov, you're allowed to do that. Why? Because food that made today is better than the food that made yesterday, right, and put in a side and hold. So if you take a wine and you did this process today, so it's better, Tosfot said, from the wine that prepared yesterday.
This is true.
Right? So the Shulchan Aruch Or HaChaim Shin Tet Vav, we just read some of that, said that halacha is according to Chachamim. So now the Gemara asks a question, Hashta Rabbi Eliezer O Sufi Ohel Arai Lo Mosifim Lemevar Lechatchila Shari. So now Rabbi Eliezer hold that we may not even add a temporary tent on Shabbat. Could it be that to make tent is permitted? Lechatchila? Mai, that none. Remember we learned about the Pkak HaChalon? What is the idea of Rabbi Eliezer? We learn in the Mishna. Regard to a window shutter used to cover a skylight. Rabbi Eliezer אומר בזמן שקשור ותלוי פורקים בו, ואם לאו אין פורקים בו, וחומרים בין כך ובין כך פורקים בו. We studied that early, if you remember. Rabbi Eliezer said if it ties and hanging from the window, which means it's not touching the ground, one may shutter the window with it, and they said just that no. Anyway, both the case or that case of God, one may shutter it, which means they disagree with Rabbi Eliezer. Everyone agreed שאין עושים אוהל ארעי לכתחילה ביום טוב, that one may not construct a temporary tent on festival for the first time. ואין צריך לומר שבת, it's obvious, needless to say that one may not do it on Shabbat. לא נחלקו, the disputation is אלא להוסיף, to add to an existing tent. שרבי אליעזר אומר, אין מוסיפים יותר, Rabbi said, you don't do it on festival, ואין צריך לומר בשבת, obvious that if you don't do it on festival, you cannot do it on Shabbat. ואומרים, מוסיפים בשבת, ואין צריך לומר ביום טוב. He said, you can add on Shabbat, and therefore it's obvious that you can do it on the festival. רבי אלעזר סבר רק רבי יהודה דתניא, אין מיום טוב לשבת לאוכל נפש בלבד, רבי לא מתיר מכשירו לאוכל נפש. That's very important. We said that what's the difference between Shabbat and Yom Tov? We said that it's only the ochel nefesh, which means that preparation of food. Rabbi Yehuda go further and he said even actions that facilitate food preparation on the festival, like
so he's more
mixing, like mixing utensil with which the food is prepared on a festival. So he allow it. So if it's strainer, right, which would otherwise it's a prohibited labor in order to prepare wine for use on the festival.
On a festival, when you're carrying on a festival, it should be something related to food in some way.
Why?
Well, that's because that's the only difference. Because on Shabbat you're not allowed to carry.
Correct.
And if the only difference between Shabbat and Yom Tov,
no, we talk about eating. We don't talk about.
Well, I understand, but it said in the Mishna we studied the only difference between Shabbat and Yom Tov is the preparation of food.
Okay, so basically,
so where do you get that you can carry on Yom Tov? If it's not, I mean, if the only difference is preparation of food.
Okay, so the idea of, it's a good question. The idea of Eruv, it's a very different mindset. It's a very good domain. Here we talk about Shabbat, the Tchum Shabbat. They allow of walking on Shabbat that we need to have a Eruv for that sense. That's not part of the whole idea of the 39 type of work that's forbidden in the Mishkan.
So
it's two separate entities.
The concept of Eruvim on Yom Tov is different than on Shabbat?
The concept of Eruv in Yom Tov is sure it's different than
Okay,
Shabbat.
so you don't have public domains and private so therefore you can carry in the public domain.
Okay, so basically we said if it's something that you're allowed to carry at the first place on Yom Tov, so if it's Yom Tov, you need, for example, to go with the talit. That it's not an Eruv, not a place that they have an Eruv, you can do that on Yom Tov.
If it's needed for Yom Tov, so for example, the first day of Sukkot, you could carry your
talit
or your lulav
and
etrog to shul on the first day.
Yes. אימא דשמינא לרבי יהודה במכשירים שאי אפשר לעשותם בערב יום טוב, מכשירים שאפשר לעשותם בערב יום טוב, מי שמית לי? So you heard from Rabbi Yehuda permits labors that otherwise prohibited if they are pertain to action that facilitate food preparations that cannot be performed on the eve of the festival. However, with regard to actions that facilitate food preparation that can be performed on the eve of the festival, did you hear that he permits doing it? So they said Rabbi Eliezer adifa mi Rabbi Yehuda. So what Rabbi Eliezer exceeds of Rabbi Yehuda, which means unlike Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Eliezer does not distinguish between action that the food preparation that do the eve of festival. What the sages meant, tala mai, So if he's suspended, so Amar Rav Yosef Tala Chayav Chatat. Rav Yosef said you need to bring a sin offering, like any melacha of shogeg, any type of unintentional, unwittingly performed labor prohibited to our Lord Shabbat. So you need to bring a sin offering. So now we said, and just we conclude this sugya, we said Amar le'Abaye Ela me'ata tala koza besichta hachenam b'demechayev. So he said, if one suspended jug of a peg is also liable of building a tent. Ela Amar Abaye, I just finished the sugya in 138a. Ela Amar Abaye midrabanani shelo yaseh kederech shu oseh bechol. That is rabbinic. That we said that we should not, he should not do something that conduct in manner that conduct himself during the week. Why? Because considering uvdin dechol, uvda dechol, that it's something that it's not in the spirit of these sacred days. The practical halacha, I would like to start with Kesef Mishnah Hilchot Shgagot, the Kesef Mishnah on the Rambam, chapter 2. If one had two babies to circumcise, one to circumcise on Shabbat and one to circumcise at the eve or after Shabbat, and he mistakenly circumcised them both on Shabbat, he is exempt from bringing a sin offering, since it's permitted and even required to override Shabbat in order to circumcise one of them. His mistake is attributed to his preoccupation with the performance of the mitzvah, and therefore he is exempt. That's the way Rav Yehuda said. We said also that the circumcision of the baby born in twilight might be postponed due to the sanctity of Shabbat and festival in the exile, or the sanctity of Rosh Hashanah for as many as 12 days after his birth. That's the Shulchan Aruch Yehuda 266. If a baby becomes physically ill, he is not circumcised until he regains his health. His circumcision is postponed 7 complete days from the time he recovered from his illness. Now, after the circumcision, if skin remains that cover most of the heights of the corona, even in a single place, the circumcision is invalid. However, if only a small amount of skin is left and it does not cover most of the corona, it does not invalidate the circumcision after the fact. Nevertheless, lechatchila, it is fitting to circumcise the infant completely. Now, if it's a fleshy baby that looks as though it has been circumcised, is examined. If he appears circumcised when his penis is erect, there is no need to circumcise him again, but his skin is pulled back and held in place. However, if he does not appear to be circumcised, the infant is circumcised in a way a little more a second time in order to avoid the appearance of being uncircumcised. Now we said that part of that circumcision is priya, which is the cover. So he said after the foreskin is removed, the area must be uncovered by removing the membranes under the foreskin. If this was done, if this was not done, the circumcision is invalid. That's Shulchan Aruch Yehuda 264. And regarding to the blessing of the brit, the person performing the circumcision recites the blessing concerning circumcision, and the father of the circumcised child recites the blessing to bring him into the covenant of Abraham, our forefather. If the father is absent or is unable to recite the blessing, the custom is for the one who holds the baby to do so. The custom is to recite the blessing over the wine, and when they recite, and then recite, he who made the beloved one holy, who established the covenant. About the convert, one who circumcised convert recite the blessing to circumcise convert, and they recite the blessing who has made us holy, to circumcise our blood in the covenant, we establish the covenant. Now, the same applied to milat avadim, to circumcision of slaves. The last halacha I would like to share with you today, it's the new parak Esrim 20. We talk about the strainer and the wine. That's Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim 3:15, 3:19, and 5:10. On Shabbat or festival, it is prohibited to stretch a cloth strainer over a base in order to filter sediment from wine. One who does so perform the prohibition labor of making a tent. On Shabbat, it's also prohibited to place wine with sediment into a strainer that was suspended before Shabbat. However, it is permitted to do so on festival. That's the opinion of the Chachamim, the opinion of the rabbis.